Entry-level jobs used to be where people got experience. Now, many of them require experience before you're allowed to start, which means the modern job market is asking beginners to bring something it no longer gives them. 35% of all positions currently labeled entry-level on LinkedIn and Indeed require years of prior relevant experience. In software and IT, that number climbs above 60%. At the same time, unemployment among recent college graduates has climbed above the national average, creating one of the largest gaps seen in the past 40 years. Meanwhile, companies across every industry are openly complaining that they cannot find qualified workers. Now think about that for a second. Companies say they cannot find experienced workers. Those same companies are also refusing to hire anyone without experience. So where exactly is that experience supposed to come from? That question sounds like frustration, but it is actually the entry point into a 40-year economic shift. To understand what went wrong, you have to understand what entry-level actually meant before it became a punchline. For most of the period from the end of World War II through the late 1970s, companies operated under what economists call a retain and reinvest model. Corporations retained their earnings and reinvested them in their workforce. They hired people without experience, trained them, offered career paths, and expected workers to stay for decades. You did not need a portfolio. You did not need certifications earned through unpaid projects. You needed to show up willing to learn. Entry-level jobs were not just low-paid work. They were training systems. The company absorbed the cost of developing the worker because that worker could eventually become the mid-level talent, then the senior talent that kept the business running. Junior roles fed into everything above them. The pipeline held because companies treated workforce development as a real business investment. Then one idea changed everything. Starting in the late 1970s and accelerating through the 1980s, a new corporate logic took over. Economists call it the downsize and distribute regime. The priority shifted from investing in employees to reducing costs and returning cash to shareholders. Quarterly earnings became the main measure of a healthy company, and training new workers, which is expensive, slow, and produces no immediate output, became a candidate for elimination. Why spend 18 months developing a junior employee when you could recruit someone already developed from a competitor? Poaching experienced workers was faster, cleaner, and easier to justify on a quarterly report. For a while, this strategy worked. The labor market had enough trained workers cycling through that companies could hire rather than build. But this logic contained a hidden assumption: it only works if someone else is doing the training. One company can skip training and hire from the market. But if every company skips training, the market stops producing trained people. Economists call this a free rider problem. In plain English, everyone wants to use the talent pool, but nobody wants to refill it. And that has a predictable end. Here is the strange part. Each company's decision to stop training was rational on its own. Why train workers your competitor might poach? Why absorb the cost of someone's learning curve when another business already paid for it? In isolation, the math works. But when every company makes the same calculation, something breaks. The shared talent pool dries up, and what replaced the training that companies stopped doing? The cost did not disappear. It shifted onto universities, onto boot camps, onto unpaid internships, onto workers themselves, who now pay thousands of dollars to acquire skills employers use to develop internally. U.S. corporate training spend fell by nearly $4 billion in 2024 compared to 2023. Large companies cut their average training budgets from $16 million to $13 million in a single year. The average training hours a worker received dropped from 57 hours in 2023 to 47 hours in 2024. Many of these are highly profitable organizations quietly reducing one of the key investments that turns beginners into experienced professionals. But here's what the bootcamp brochure never tells you. A classroom cannot replicate what a job does. Real workplace experience teaches judgment. How to read a room. How to make decisions with incomplete information. How to understand the unwritten rules of an organization. None of that can be acquired through a 12-week course. It can only be accumulated by doing real work inside a real organization. Companies shifted the cost of training, but they could not shift the thing training was producing. And that is where the entry-level job stopped being entry-level. Two more forces tightened the squeeze. First was lean staffing. Over the past 2 decades, doing more with fewer people became standard across most industries. High output per employee, minimal redundancy. every role operating at full capacity. In that structure, a beginner becomes a liability. They slow the team down. They need oversight. They make mistakes that cost time to correct. Lean teams have no tolerance for the learning curve that turns someone into a professional. Second was application volume. When platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed made it possible to apply for a job in 60 seconds, companies began receiving hundreds of applications for every opening. Hiring became a filtering problem. Adding a requirement for 3 to 5 years of experience became a cheap way to shrink the applicant pool, even when the job itself did not genuinely require that experience. This is experience inflation. Requirements crept upward not because the work changed, but because candidate abundance made it possible. The entry-level label survived. The actual accessibility of those roles did not. Entry-level postings requiring 0 to 2 years of experience have declined by 29 percentage points since January 2024 alone. And none of this accounts for what AI has started doing to the tasks that made beginner roles worth having in the first place. Entry-level roles were often built around structured, repetitive, process-heavy work. Data entry, first draft writing, meeting summaries, preliminary research, basic code generation, document review. These tasks were not glamorous, but they served a function beyond output. They were where junior workers absorbed tacit knowledge, the context that only comes from doing real work inside a real organization, the judgment that a classroom cannot teach. AI agents are now automating exactly that category of work. A McKinsey report found that roughly 25% of current work tasks globally could already be automated with existing technology, with structured and repetitive tasks among the most vulnerable. Entry-level finance positions have already fallen by 24 percentage points as AI takes on the modeling and summarizing work analysts used to learn from. And a LinkedIn analysis found that 63% of executives expect AI to absorb most of the tasks entry-level employees used to handle within 3 to 4 years. The company saves money on the task. The junior role disappears. And the training mechanism embedded in that role disappears with it. Companies did not eliminate the need for experience. They eliminated the place where experience was created. Here's why this becomes dangerous long-term. Every senior engineer, experienced analyst, and tenured manager was once a junior employee. They built their judgment somewhere. They made their early mistakes inside an organization that absorbed that cost because developing workers was part of operating a business. That deal is being canceled. And when it disappears, what replaces it? A Harvard study tracking 62 million workers across 285,000 U.S. firms found that junior employment at AI adopting companies drops 9 to 10% within 6 quarters of AI implementation. Senior employment remains mostly unchanged. The senior roles survive because they require the judgment AI cannot replicate. But that judgment had to be built somewhere. And the work is not vanishing into AI alone. Research from the World Economic Forum shows that tasks removed from junior roles are often pushed upward, leaving middle managers and senior talent more overloaded. The senior workforce is being asked to carry more, while the pipeline feeding it quietly closes. Forrester projects a 20% decline in computer science enrollment as students respond to a deteriorating job market. Fewer entrants today means fewer experienced professionals in 5 to 10 years. Exactly when the systems currently being built with AI will require skilled human oversight to maintain. The shortage will not announce itself. It will arrive quietly, years from now, when companies need experienced workers and discover they stopped funding the system that creates them. It is fair to acknowledge the pressure behind these decisions. Hiring and developing beginners costs time and money. AI does automate repetitive work that used to justify junior salaries. Some industries, including healthcare, construction, and skilled trades, still invest in new workers because those roles cannot be abstracted away as easily. And companies on thin margins sometimes cannot absorb long onboarding cycles. So the individual decisions are not irrational. But when every company makes the same rational short-term decision at the same time, the system stops replenishing itself. The World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs Report 2025 projects that 40% of employers worldwide expect to reduce headcount where AI can automate tasks. The roles expected to grow require deep contextual judgment built over years of applied experience. The same experience that is no longer being built anywhere. Each company optimizes for its own quarterly report. The industry loses the infrastructure that produces experienced workers. And in a decade, every company may be competing for a shrinking pool of senior talent that nobody was willing to create. Businesses still want experienced workers. They just stopped funding the system that creates them. This is not about lazy graduates or heartless companies. It is about incentives. The old model ran on a simple logic. Invest in workers today, benefit from their productivity for years. The new model runs on a different logic. Extract value today, worry about tomorrow later. AI did not invent this problem. It inherited it. And it is making the consequences arrive faster than anyone planned for. Companies did not just raise the bar for entry-level jobs. They removed the ladder that helped people reach it. Subscribe if you want to understand the systems shaping the economy before the consequences become impossible to ignore.